Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Tonight, we will have an update of the DeKalb's Tenant-Landlord Assistance Coalition program. First, we will hear from our CEO, Michael Thurmond, followed by the Chief Clerk for the Magistrate and State Court of DeKalb County, Ms. Javoyne Hicks. So again, welcome. And now I would turn the program over to our CEO, Michael Thurmond.
Thank you, Ms. Baker. Good evening. And on behalf of our governing authority, which is comprised of myself as CEO and the DeKalb County Board of Commissioners and the 750,000+ residents, I would like to welcome the attendees to this Tenant-Landlord Assistance webinar tonight. We're delighted and that you have decided to express interest in participating in our ongoing effort to mitigate the economic impact of COVID-19. DeKalb County has received approximately $30 million in two tranches to support tenants and landlords as we maneuver through the health and economic crisis that we are facing. Tonight, we're going to focus our attention on helping landlords better understand the resources that are available, and more importantly, how to fill out the application. We want to answer questions. And most importantly, we want to emphasize the fact that we are focused on helping tenants and landlords through this crisis. I've had the heartbreaking experience of talking to landlords, many of them small and some large, but many small ones in particular, who have struggled mightily over the last 15 or 16 months, as they have not received rent from tenants who either lost their jobs or may be infected by the virus or unable to pay. We want to be of assistance. We want to help. Most of all, we want you to know that we recognize the challenges you are facing, and we hope that after tonight's program, you will find the opportunity to participate in this strategy. There have been some challenges. We've had the money. Some 2.5 months ago, we were the victim of an international cyber attack by individuals acting outside of the borders of the United States of America. We've been working closely with federal authorities, providing them with all the information they need and even access to the server so that we can track down these individuals who are perpetrating a crime against our government. And it created some major challenges for our program. The good news is, under the direction of Ms. Hicks, our clerk, and her staff, we've continued to persevere. We've been able to distribute over $1.1 million in rental assistance that ends up in the bank accounts of landlords. We've helped 300 plus tenants, and we've delivered $1.1 million. Of course, there's about $29 million left in the coffers, and we don't want the money in our bank account. We want it in the bank accounts of landlords throughout DeKalb County. So we are here tonight. We reopened the application. Ms. Hicks is going to talk to you about that in more detail, but I'm encouraged, I'm focused, I'm dedicated, and we want to be partners with you as we overcome the challenges that we face. Once again, thank you so much for being here, and I'll return this program back to Ms. Baker.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. And I do want to encourage anyone, if you have any questions, please enter those questions into the chat box. We will attempt to try to answer as many questions as this program allows, but we will make sure that any questions that we did not get a chance to answer live during the webinar, we will add it to our Q&A page on the program. So again, please input your, yes?
Yeah, Ms. Baker, you said the chat box. Actually, it is the Q&A.
Oh, I'm sorry, Q&A box. I apologize for that. The Q&A box, please. Put your questions in, and I will be asking the panelists the questions at the end of the program. Thank you. So now we will have Ms. Javoyne Hicks, who is our Magistrate and State Court Clerk. And Ms. Hicks, take it away.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Mr. CEO. Welcome, everyone. The purpose for us being here tonight is to mainly answer any questions that you all have about the process as it relates to you as landlords in participating in the TLAC program. What we have done when we relaunched our application process is that those applications now come through our eFile Georgia system. A lot of you are already familiar with that process because we have had eFile for processing of cases through when you file for a writ. So that process is the same, and we just expanded it to include the way we accept applications. But if you're not familiar with it and you need any assistance with filing applications, you can go to the website we have on our website, which is www.DeKalbCountyGA/rent-help. And if you go to the website, there's all types of information there for you to find out, if you applied before, and you can check your status by going on to the Odyssey portal. Again, if you're someone that normally deals with the magistrate court and the dispossessory court, you should be used to our Odyssey system and check in Odyssey to find out the status of your case. You can find out the status of your original case if you have cases filed already in dispossessory court, and that case will have a D number that goes with your case. But you can also go on Odyssey if you have filed an application with us through the TLAC program. But the process on checking that is the same. The link to both eFile Georgia and the link to the Odyssey portal in order to check the status of your case are both accessible on the website. Once you have checked the website and you don't have a D number, a D number means that you have filed a case already with our system through our dispossessory court. That would be a D number. Your case with the rental assistance program will be an R number. But those cases in our system will be linked together. So if you already have a case in the system and you want to file an application on behalf of your tenant in order to receive funds, we will link the R case, the new Tenant-Landlord Assistance case, to the existing D case. What we wanted also to provide information to you is to take advantage of the opportunity instead of just going directly as a landlord and filing for an eviction. You can file to see if the tenant would qualify for the services under the TLAC program. If you can work with your tenant and come to some agreements ahead of time, then you can present the information to us, and you could actually bypass some steps in the application process. Because if you already have an agreement as to how much is owed, how much you want to allow for the tenant to stay in the location, and the tenant qualifies for up to 2 months of future rent, and know what that information is, we can get that information in an agreement and move that case forward towards payment if the tenant qualifies, rather than going through the full process, which is an extra step of getting the information to us, and then that case being sent either to the mediators or to legal aid. If you have an attorney who represents you, we send those tenant cases to legal aid. If neither party has an attorney representing them, then those cases are going and being represented by, or not represented, but going towards mediation. So you can help bypass some steps if you are able to work together with your tenant to be able to come and submit applications. There's some processes that as a landlord, we want you to remember that this assistance is for the benefit of the tenant, but the funds go to the landlord or the utility if the tenant needs utility assistance. What does that mean? That means that when a landlord files an application, you still have to provide tenant information. Primary information from the tenant is their wage statement, whether it's their information about their employment information, or they can have a declaration of their wages. but that information about the tenant has to be provided. The tenant has to submit the application because the requirements of the grant require us to have that information to determine whether the tenant qualifies for assistance. And sometimes I know that question comes to us a lot because they will say, well, they're not talking with their tenant or they can't get that information from the tenant. We have to have that information about the tenant because the purpose of this process, this particular program, because this is not the only program that is in existence, but this particular program is about helping the tenant to remain in the property. So one of the other challenges that we hear about from landlords is the fact that, well, their tenant has moved out. So unfortunately, in those instances, because this program is to maintain the tenant in the property, then your case would not qualify for this program. Again, there are other programs out there for assistance in those other situations, but the primary goal of this program is to provide for tenant assistance to allow the tenant to remain in the location. One of the other things that I want to point out about the information that we need from you as a landlord, we need your address and contact information, your tax ID number, because the funds are being submitted to you. So we need a tax ID number. And you need the lease and proof of the ledger or proof of what is owed by the tenant. Unfortunately, this is a grant to help people stay in their property. It is not going to solve and make everybody whole. Unfortunately, even with the dollars that have been awarded, they're not enough to cover all of the need that's out there. So we're trying to do everything we can to provide the assistance necessary to keep people moving forward as we get through these difficult times. Before that, one other thing, if you are working with your tenant and that tenant does have some utility issues that also need addressing, that's why it is important for them to also file their application, because they would put that information on that application, especially if those utilities are not paid to you. I know sometimes, depending on your situation, the utilities are paid to you. And if that's the case, you include that information on the application as well. But if there are things that are not covered by the landlord, that's going to be in the tenant application. Again, all of this information is on the website. We also have a tutorial. There's a video tutorial on how to file that we have provided for everybody's use. And there's flyers, step-by-step instructions. My wonderful team has provided diagrams to help move you toward or through the process. One other thing that I want to mention, when you're checking the status of your case, if you've already applied for rental assistance, but you have not heard back and you want to find out the status, we have simplified how you can check and what that means when you look on the portal and see the stage your case is in. It's like, well, what does that mean? So when you go to the Odyssey platform and you find your case, you'll see that your case is in different steps and it's called events. And these are event types. And for instance, one of the event types on this particular program will say TLAC application received. So if you see that on your case, you'll know that we received your application. If you're moving through the process and you check and the last event type says TLAC program approved, then that means your application was approved and it's moving on to the next step. We are going, and the goal is to get you as quickly as possible to the event type that says payment in process, which is toward the end of the process right before it says case closed. So you can go on Odyssey portal. Again, the link is on the website. Check the progress of your case if you haven't received information and you want to check the status. That is how you can do that. I'm going to first, before I open it up for questions and look and see, review the questions that have been submitted thus far. My leadership team on our Tenant-Landlord Assistance Coalition, TLAC program that we call it, Sabrina Franklin, who is here with us this evening. Sabrina is our project coordinator for this program. Deborah Cross has been elevated to her deputy project coordinator for the purposes of this program. Kimberly Phelps is our lead IT person, and as she is the one that coordinates how we work through eFile Georgia and Odyssey. And Marae is our IT person that's dedicated solely for the TLAC program to be able to help with issues that come up. She's part of the team that has come up with these wonderful graphics that we have, and we are doing everything that we can to make sure that we can process your applications and provide the service that you need as quickly as possible. I see that there are a couple of questions. Let's see if there's some that I have not. If someone filed an application prior to we had mentioned before that the county suffered a cyber attack and that the applications that we do not have access to the majority of the applications that were submitted in February. If you have an application, you can resubmit that application through the eFile Georgia system and let us know. First, you go on Odyssey and make sure that we don't have it in the system. If we don't have it in the system and you resubmit it, you let us know, because there's a box you can add that this is a submission is you've applied before, and we will process those applications. You're not going to the back of the line. If you can show us that you had applied previously, then we will process that application. Let's see.
Ms. Hicks, can you address the situation when either the tenant has already moved out and whether or not the tenant is participating in getting the necessary documents so that we can prove that the tenant is eligible? Can you address those two scenarios?
So if the tenant has moved out, unfortunately, you cannot qualify for this program, because this program is to maintain tenants in the location. So if they've moved out, then there are other recourses for the landlord to pursue, but it's not available for this program. Which other question were you referencing?
If the tenant is refusing to submit documentation, not participating in providing the necessary documents that you need to qualify the tenant, what is the recourse?
So the only recourse, unfortunately, for that situation as well is that you have to continue to follow the legal recourses that are already available, because the tenant is the one that has to qualify. The wage statement is one of the major documents that the federal government, and who is the controller of these dollars, requires that they fit into a certain wage range. And we have to have that information. And if the tenant is not cooperating, we can't go around that requirement. The offices, I'm sorry,
go ahead.
I was going to say, in addressing one of the questions, the offices are open. And if you need assistance in person, You can go on the website and make an appointment. It's called the Wait While system, and it's part of the website. So you can go to the website, or you can call if you need assistance with even making the appointment. You can call our offices, which is 404-371-3201. And one of the agents that answers that call can help set up an appointment for you if you do need in-person assistance. So our offices are open. And just as a general, the judicial emergency ended yesterday. So most of the offices in the courthouse are providing services. Well, we never stop providing services, but we are open to the public, and you can make an appointment to come see us.
Do you have an estimated time of when checks are cut once it goes through the process?
Once the case gets to the point of the case has been referred for payment, it takes about 10 business days for the check to be sent out. One of the things that we have added to our process, or are adding to our process, is to provide notification to the parties once the case gets to that point, so that you can be on the lookout, so the landlords can be on the lookout for those funds. Because one of the things that we're seeing, believe it or not, is that we've issued checks and they're not being cashed. So we want to make sure that when the payments are sent out, that they are cashed, because if they sit around, then we have to stop payment, and that costs money that should be going for the benefit of everybody rather than to the bank for a stop payment. So we are starting to notify people when those checks, when it's being referred for payment, and then so you can be on the lookout and then cash those checks.
And do you have a list of what documentation is needed, both to be submitted by the tenant and to be submitted by the landlord? Where's the information listed?
The information is listed on the website on the required documents section. We also have flyers on the website that if you want to print it out for yourself, that talk about where you can find the required documents. And again, those required documents for the landlord are your contact information, the lease agreement, or your rental agreement. Some people don't have a formalized lease. They have a rental agreement that have entered into with their tenant. So we need that agreement, that signed agreement by both parties. The tenant wage information is what we need. And documentation of payments. So a ledger or something that you keep track of the payments that are made and the ones that are missed, and what you're looking for in recovery. If you have filed a case, a dispossessory case in our office, then we need that D number. We need the information that says that you have a case in process, so that we can make sure we link those cases together. Or if a dispossessory warrant or eviction warrant, if you have any of those things, to let us know that. Again, the utility bills, if you know of the tenant's utility bills, so that's if applicable. And if you as landlord receive any rental assistance subsidy, whether that's Section 8 or any other kind of subsidies, then we need to have that information as well. But that list is on the website.
And if the tenant is not employed and has not worked in over 14 months, what information on wages or income is needed for the tenant to provide?
There is what we call a wage declaration form that is accessible on the website as well, and the tenant can declare that that's their situation. They have to sign that document, and they're signing that document stating that they have not worked in X number of time. They don't have any wages, and they're declaring that to be their statement. So that is acceptable documentation as well as far as wages.
And I'm going to ask just a couple more questions before we end tonight. Is there a cap on how much is paid under this program for past due rent? and why not pay the full amount that's owed?
So we are working with a lot of need here in DeKalb County. So we have to have some guidelines as to how much funding is distributed to the parties who are applying so that as many people as possible can be served. So that is the reason why we have some guidelines. Those guidelines are part of the negotiations when you get with either with the mediator or with the landlord, with the legal aid to discuss what those guidelines are.
And this last question I'm going to ask you is, what happens if the landlord does not have a tax ID number, but have other documentation?
Well, tax ID number or social security number, whatever it is that you use to file with the federal government to track your income is what is needed before those funds can be distributed. So it doesn't have to be an official, what they call a tax ID number. It can be your social security number.
Okay. Now, Mr. CEO, if you are still there, I think we are coming to the end of this program. This tonight. And if you wanted to give any kind of closing remarks, we are now ready for your closing remark, Mr. CEO.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Okay.
Sharon. One more thing that I just want to note that part of the agreements, when you enter into the agreements with your tenants as part of this program, the main thing about this program is that it's to ensure that the tenant can remain in the home. So you are part of your agreement. You're agreeing that you will not proceed with eviction proceedings as it relates to anything pending prior to you entering into this agreement. So if you're not made whole, for instance, and you're provided with some back rent and 2 months of future rent, but then you tell the tenant, well, you still owe me that other money and I'm going to now move forward with eviction. That's not allowed under this program. This program, you are agreeing that you enter this agreement and that you're accepting the funding that's being provided. You can receive up to 2 months of future rent. And then if the tenant continues to pay as they're supposed to, then you all move forward. And if the tenant does not continue to pay as they should, then you have the regular remedies that were already available under the law. I just want to clarify that.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ms. Hicks, for answering those questions and providing such detailed information. Mr. CEO, are you ready now to provide your closing comments on this webinar?
But first, I want to thank our clerk, Ms. Hicks, and her staff. They have done a phenomenal job under extremely difficult circumstances, standing up our TLAC coalition. We have other partners, of course, with the Magistrates Court and Legal Aid and others. But this clerk's office is the heart of the coalition. And Clerk Hicks, thank you so much, Ms. Sabrina, Ms. Kimberly, and that entire team for doing all the great work that you do. I want to thank our Innovation and Technology Director, Mr. Matowski, as always. He's the maestro of setting this up, as well as Ms. Diamond Lewis with the DeKalb Communications, and of course, Ms. Sharon Baker, who has served as our host today. To the landlords who are on this call, I want to reiterate something that we understand the challenges that you are facing. We recognize this extreme financial difficulty you've been placed in, and this is not a panacea. And obviously, we won't be able to match dollar for dollar every dollar that's been lost. But what we do want to do, and what we are doing, is that we want to mitigate the financial burden that you've had. But more than that, we want you to know that we understand and that we're going to do everything we can to support and assist. So once again, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you all who presented. And we look forward to receiving additional applications from our landlords and tenants in the coming weeks. Thank you.